Welcome back to Fanfics in a Nutshell. Today, we're stepping into a timeline where one interruption changes everything. What if Naruto didn't just survive Orochimaru's attack in the Forest of Death, but came out of it reborn with eyes that could see the world in a way no one else could? Because the moment that change begins, the entire balance of the story starts to tilt. And at first, no one understands just how dangerous that shift really is. The second stage of the Chunin exams was supposed to be simple in theory and brutal in practice. Enter the Forest of Death, hunt down another team, take the scroll you need, and make it to the tower alive. For Team 7, it had already turned into a disaster long before anyone could think about victory. Orochimaru's attack had shattered the rhythm of the exam and left the team broken in pieces. Sasuke was down. Naruto had been hit with a ceiling strike directly over the Nine-Tails prison, and Sakura, exhausted, half-panicked, and running on sheer stubbornness, was the only thing standing between her team and complete collapse. By the time the Sound Ninja cornered her, she was at the end of herself. She had already cut her hair, already burned through what little chakra she had left, already gone past fear and into that strange state where the body keeps moving only because stopping would mean death. Across from her stood three enemies who knew exactly how weak her position had become. They circled, taunted, tested her traps, and waited for the moment she finally slipped. It was cruel, not efficient, not clean, cruel. And behind her, Naruto and Sasuke still weren't moving. Sakura wanted one of them to wake up. She didn't care which one. Just one. One voice. One hand. One sign that she wasn't carrying the whole weight of this fight alone. But what she didn't know, what no one in that forest knew, was that Naruto's body was going through a transformation so violent and so complete that even calling it an awakening almost feels too small. Ever since the day the Nine Tails had been sealed inside him, Naruto had never truly belonged to himself. The fox's chakra had been leaking into his system since infancy, disrupting the natural balance of his own energy. Too much raw physical force, not enough spiritual harmony, too much yang, not enough yin. That imbalance had shaped everything about him. His poor control, his hyperactivity, his inability to do simple techniques the way others could. He hadn't just been an untalented kid struggling to keep up. He'd been fighting his own body every second of his life without even knowing it. Then Orochimaru's seal struck. And for the first time since the day Naruto was born, the Nine-Tails chakra was cut off. For one impossible critical window, all the chakra in Naruto's body became wholly his own. That was all it took. His body, finally free to correct itself, surged toward equilibrium like a starving man gasping for air. Something buried deep inside him, something denied expression for nearly 12 years, finally pushed back against the weight that had smothered it. Nature itself seemed to feel it first. The trees swayed, the sky shifted, the air changed. It was as if the world around him recognized that something ancient and overwhelming had just been allowed to breathe. Then the pulse hit. It blasted out across the forest with such force that every ninja in the area froze. Not because they understood it, but because instinct told them to. Teams hidden in the trees and bushes felt it and went still. The Sound Ninja felt sweat run cold down their backs. Beyond the forest, shinobi all across the village stopped mid-step. The third Hokage turned toward the exam grounds. Kakashi dropped his book. Jiraiya abandoned everything else and snapped to attention. The barrier teams nearly collapsed under the pressure of it. No one knew what had emerged, only that something had. Back in the clearing, Sakura was the first to force her head around and look. Naruto was glowing. The chakra around him was blue, thin, almost translucent, but the pressure behind it was suffocating. And then he stood up. That was the moment the fear changed. Because this was no wild burst of the Nine-Tails, no berserk rage. No animal madness. The air around Naruto felt wrong in a different way now. He stood too still, too balanced, too aware, like the world itself had shifted a step closer to him. Sakura stared at his face and nearly forgot the enemies in front of her. His whisker marks were gone, his eyes were still blue, but not the blue she knew. They seemed brighter, sharper, almost lit from within. It wasn't just that they looked unusual. It was that looking into them made people feel seen in a way they were not prepared for. Naruto opened them fully and in a single instant took in everything. The teams hidden nearby, the enemy positions, Sakura's exhaustion, Sasuke's condition, residual chakra in the air, the shape of the battlefield, the traces of techniques already used. It all hit him at once, and instead of breaking under the sheer amount of information, he adapted to it immediately. His mind became clear in a way it had never been before. Sakura, still trying to understand what she was looking at, asked the only question she could. "Naruto, are you okay?" Naruto didn't answer that. He looked at the Sound Ninja and calmly asked, "What do they want?" It was such an ordinary sentence that it almost made the scene more surreal. One of the sound Chunin shouted at him, trying to reclaim control, trying to turn this back into a fight he understood. He never finished the sentence. Naruto moved. No one saw the start of it. No one tracked the middle. One moment he was standing beside Sakura, and the next his fist had already slammed into the sound ninja's chest. The impact was savage. Air exploded outward. The ground cracked where Naruto had pushed off. The boy was launched backward like he had been hit by a battering ram, thrown into a tree so hard that for a second everyone watching thought he was dead. Silence followed. Not the silence of confusion. The silence of recalculation. Because the dead last clown they all knew had not just improved, he had crossed into an entirely different category. Naruto looked at his own hand for half a second as if mildly curious, then glanced back at Sakura and asked, almost casually, who that guy even was. That was the most unnerving part of it. He wasn't raging. He wasn't showing off. He wasn't drunk on power. He was treating the impossible like it had become normal. The remaining sound ninja understood the new reality much faster than anyone else. Their leader offered a scroll and a retreat. No bravado, no threats, just surrender. Naruto accepted it with a shrug as if this outcome only made sense and then immediately returned to acting like himself, joking, talking too loudly, calling Sasuke a sleeping princess, and asking why the other Leaf teams had only been watching. That contrast made it worse. If Naruto had become cold, people could have explained it. If he had become monstrous, they could have categorized him. But he was still Naruto, still reckless, still blunt, still laughing. Only now he moved like lightning, saw through lies and hidden observers in an instant, and carried enough pressure in his chakra to make other genin hesitate to breathe. The walk to the tower only confirmed it. Ambushes that should have slowed them down were ended almost before they began. Sakura, too tired to keep trying to understand him, could only follow behind and accept that her teammate had somehow become terrifying. Inside the tower, the mood changed again. The exam riddle that should have stalled them barely lasted a moment before Naruto solved it. When the scrolls were opened and Iruka appeared, even he was thrown off balance by what he saw. Sasuke's condition made sense. Sakura's exhaustion made sense. Naruto did not. Because the Nine-Tails' presence that had always clung to him was missing, and in its place was something no one in the village had a name for. Naruto brushed off medical concern, casually identified the curse-marked chakra poisoning Sasuke, and then retreated to think. That alone would have been enough to disturb the adults. Naruto thinking carefully was almost as alarming as Naruto moving like a jonin, and by the time the preliminaries were ready to begin, the people who mattered most had already started to gather around the question he represented. The Hokage, Kakashi, Jiraiya, all of them waiting to see the same thing, not whether Naruto had changed, but how far. What they are about to witness in the preliminaries is not just a stronger version of the same boy. It is the public debut of a force no one in that room was prepared to measure correctly. By the next day, Naruto had begun to understand at least part of what had changed. He sat alone before the preliminaries, staring out at the village and trying to put words to a sensation that refused to fit into simple language. Before this, the world had always felt blunt to him, loud and messy and slightly out of reach. Now it was the opposite. Every detail was too sharp. Every current of chakra too obvious. He could look at wood and understand the chakra that shaped it. He could look at a person and tell where their energy was dense, where it was weak, where it was flowing cleanly, where it was disturbed. Even when he shut his eyes, it did not really become darkness. The world remained there, mapped in pressure, energy, and motion. It should have overwhelmed him. Instead, he adapted to it almost immediately. That was what made it frightening. When the genin were brought together for the preliminaries, the room itself changed around Naruto's presence. It was subtle at first. A pause here, a glance there. Conversations that should have continued but didn't. Most of the younger shinobi could not understand what exactly they were reacting to, only that being too close to him felt dangerous in a way that crawled along the spine. The adults understood more, and that made them even more cautious. High above, Hiruzen watched without looking away. Jiraiya stood nearby with a seriousness that did not suit his usual posture. Kakashi, who knew Naruto better than almost anyone in that building, had already reached the same conclusion the others were reluctantly approaching. This was not a passing fluctuation, not a burst of stress or an unstable mutation that might vanish by morning. Naruto had awakened something fundamental, and if it remained with him, the balance of the village would change around that fact whether anyone liked it or not. Even Orochimaru, hidden in plain sight, stared at the blonde boy with genuine disbelief. Down among the competitors, Naruto himself was having the time of his life. That made Sasuke's mood significantly worse. Naruto kept prodding him with little comments, mocking his expression, baiting him every chance he got, laughing when Sasuke glared, laughing harder when Sasuke refused to answer, and somehow turning the entire waiting period into a private gain. Sakura, who under normal circumstances would have been trying to keep the two of them from tearing into each other, was too mentally exhausted to contribute much of anything. She had spent too much of the last day trying to reconcile the idiot she knew with the thing she had watched rise in the forest. The Hokage began his speech. Naruto ignored most of it. Not because he didn't understand. Quite the opposite. He understood it faster than ever. The politics behind the Chunin exams. The performance. The way villages use these matches to advertise their future strength. The message hidden beneath all the formal words. He got it almost instantly and had no patience left for the long version. So when the old man kept speaking, Naruto interrupted him in front of everyone. The room stiffened. Some were offended. Some embarrassed. Some alarmed by the disrespect. But when Naruto summed up the entire point of the speech in a few blunt sentences and got it exactly right, that tension changed shape. Because it was one more reminder that the boy everyone had dismissed as impulsive and academically hopeless was now processing complex situations almost as soon as they unfolded. The old Naruto might have blundered his way into the truth. This Naruto arrived there cleanly and with total confidence. Then the preliminaries began. Sasuke's match came first, and even that became another quiet revelation. Naruto looked at Sasuke's opponent once, really looked at him, and immediately warned Sasuke to avoid the man's hands. It was not a guess. It was not instinct. He could see the strange behavior of the chakra there before anyone else had confirmed what it meant. Sasuke, trusting the warning more than he would ever admit, adjusted quickly and won. That alone put people on edge. Naruto wasn't just stronger. He was reading battles before they happened. As the fights continued, he made himself impossible to ignore. He called out observations from the sidelines, half mocking, half helpful, and entirely too accurate. He identified chakra behaviors other genin could not see. He spotted weaknesses faster than some of the proctors. He ruined surprises simply because he found it entertaining. The line between comic relief and tactical genius became so blurred that no one in the room was comfortable with it. Only a few adults seemed almost amused by the chaos he created. Kakashi, Hiruzen, and Jiraiya were all learning from it. Every stray comment Naruto made gave them a little more insight into what those new eyes could actually do. Then came Naruto's own match. Kaiba entered it with the confidence of someone who still thought he understood the world as it had been yesterday. He saw the old Naruto when he looked across the arena. Loudmouth. Dead last. Unrefined. The kind of opponent you could crush quickly and then move on from. Akamaru knew better. The little dog refused to move, trembling in place, instinct screaming at him with a clarity his partner completely missed. Animals had no need for pride. No need for explanations. They knew predators when they smelled them. Kaiba mocked Naruto anyway. The fight began, and the gap between assumption and reality became humiliating almost instantly. Kaiba attacked at full speed, fast by Genin standards, aggressive, committed. Naruto watched him the way one might watch rain slide down glass. Every twitch of muscle, every adjustment of balance, every shift in intent was visible before the strike had even finished forming. To Naruto, Kiba did not look fast. He looked delayed. So Naruto vanished from in front of him and reappeared behind him with absurd ease. The room reacted all at once. Surprise, confusion, a few flashes of fear. Kiba attacked again. Naruto slid past him again. Not barely. Not by desperation. By comfort. By control. He was not fighting to survive the assault. He was letting Kiba exhaust himself against the idea of catching him. The more it happened, the more humiliating it became. Kiba's irritation turned to anger, then to frustration, then to the first faint edge of panic. From the stands, the implications hit almost harder than the actual blows. Neji confirmed that chakra was actively flowing through Naruto's eyes the way it did through true ocular bloodlines. Kakashi noted that his body enhancement was so precise that almost no chakra was being wasted. Jiraiya and the Hokage exchanged the kind of looks old soldiers reserve for moments when possibility suddenly becomes threat. Sasuke said very little, which for him said everything. He watched with his Sharingan active and still could not fully account for what he was seeing. This was not just speed, it was efficiency sharpened to a terrifying degree. Naruto wasn't moving wildly, he wasn't overcommitting, he wasn't stumbling forward on raw output the way he used to in fights. Every motion had become clean. That was worse than simple power, because power can be challenged. Precision changes everything. At last, Naruto got bored. That was the detail people remembered most afterward. Not the speed, not the ease. The boredom. He actually warned Kiba that he was about to attack now, as if the whole exchange had only been a warm-up. Then he crossed the distance and landed a single punch. Kiba went down instantly. No elaborate combination, no trick, no clone feint. Just one clean strike with enough force to put him on the ground and end the match beyond argument. And then Naruto looked genuinely curious about whether he had overdone it. That question carried farther than he realized, because it told everyone listening that he had not yet calibrated his own strength. He was still figuring out what counted as light contact now, still learning where the upper limits of his body and chakra enhancement really were. That thought unsettled the room more than the victory itself. Hayate called the match. Naruto bounced back to the stands with the same wild energy he always had, grinning, talking, acting like he had merely finished some minor errand. But the atmosphere around him had changed again. There were no more dismissive looks now, no more easy assumptions. Even the students who disliked him were being forced to update their understanding in real time. Shikamaru, too sharp to let the moment pass without trying to extract information, stepped forward and asked the obvious question. What exactly was going on with Naruto's eyes? Naruto, pleased to be asked, gave the least useful answer possible. He had super awesome eyes now. Half the room nearly collapsed from frustration. And yet buried under the joke was the truth. Because Naruto himself still did not fully understand the extent of what he had become. He understood effects before he understood language. He could perceive things he could not yet explain. He knew he could see better, think faster, control chakra more cleanly, understand structures he had never been taught. But he had no technical vocabulary for any of it, only confidence and instinct. Sasuke kept staring. Sakura kept watching. The adults kept calculating. And somewhere beneath the laughter and the noise, a new truth was settling over everyone in that room. Naruto Uzumaki was no longer the unpredictable underdog of Team 7. He was becoming the center of the entire exam. That truth settles fully a few matches later, when the room is forced to confront not just how strong Naruto has become, but what that strength does to everyone around him. At first, the preliminaries continue as though the exam can still pretend to be normal. Sakura and Ino step into the arena and turn what should have been a tense match into something fragile and deeply personal, a fight less about dominance and more about pride, insecurity, and stubbornness. Naruto watches it with open disappointment, not because he hates either of them, but because his new eyes make weakness impossible to romanticize. He can see the hesitation in their movements, the inefficiency in their chakra use, the way both of them are trying to win while carrying too much emotional noise to fight cleanly. When they finally collapse into a double knockout, he says exactly what no one wants to hear. It was lame, brutally honest, tactless as ever, and deeply irritating to everyone around him. Kakashi smacks him for it. Asuma glares. Sakura, barely conscious, would probably have thrown something at him if she could still stand. But even in that moment, Naruto's cruelty is not really the point. The point is that he is seeing these fights from somewhere far above the level he used to occupy. He is no longer looking across at his peers hoping to catch up. He is measuring them, comparing styles, reading chakra signatures, picking apart flaws. And the more he does it, the more obvious it becomes that his mind is moving ahead of everyone else's. Then Rock Lee steps into the arena against Gaara, and for the first time since Naruto's awakening, his attention sharpens into something close to admiration. The fight begins like a contradiction made visible. Lee is all work, discipline, and explosive physical commitment. Gaara barely moves, protected by that eerie wall of living sand. To most people watching, it looks like a simple matchup of speed against defense. To Naruto, it is much stranger than that. He can see multiple chakra signatures flowing through the sand, layered in a way that should not make sense if Gaara is the only one controlling it. He says so out loud, and that single observation sends quiet shock through the adults listening. Sasuke assumes Naruto merely means Gaara is channeling his chakra into the sand. Naruto dismisses that idea immediately. No, there is more than one presence in there, more than one force at work. He does not yet have the full explanation, but he knows what he is seeing is wrong. Then Lee dropped his weights. The impact alone changes the temperature of the room. The floor trembles. Every Chunin staring down into the arena realizes at once that the cheerful taijutsu specialist they had half dismissed has been carrying a private war on his own body this entire time. Naruto laughs in disbelief, not at Lee, but in delight. That kind of commitment makes sense to him now. More than that, it impresses him. Lee has no monstrous bloodline awakening, no sudden gift descending from nowhere. He has built himself through pain and repetition into something almost unbelievable, and Naruto can see every line of that effort carved into the precision of his movement. When Lee launches forward at full speed, Naruto watches with the fascination of a student discovering a language he wants to steal. Every shift in Lee's stance, every snap of the hip, every perfect angle of a strike, every clean transfer of force, Naruto drinks it in. Before, he would have just seen someone moving fast and hitting hard. Now he can see the mechanics beneath it, the hidden logic, the reason it works. He begins learning from Lee in the middle of the fight, dissecting his form while the battle is still happening, because that is what these eyes do. They do not just witness, they consume and understand. Gaara, meanwhile, becomes more disturbing by the second. The sand moves not like a technique, but like instinct, like protection born from something deeper than conscious control. Naruto watches the strange energies within it, not and surge and answer threats before Gaara himself fully reacts. Then, Lee breaks through with the lotus, and for one suspended breath it seems as though hard work has carved open the impossible. Naruto ruins the moment immediately. He announces that it was a substitution. Teen Guy turns in horror. The room follows his warning with delayed disbelief. And then the attack ends exactly the way he said it would, revealing that while everyone else was still caught in the spectacle, Naruto had already seen through it. Again, Lee keeps going, even after the failed lotus, even after the cost starts mounting. Guy, tense at the railing, is already living with the consequence of a choice only a desperate teacher would make. Naruto sees chakra slamming against internal barriers in Lee's body and blurts out that he is breaking through them. Kakashi names them the 8 gates. Guy and Kakashi clash briefly over what that means, over whether this is admirable or unforgivable, but Naruto, unexpectedly, sides with neither simplistic view. He says what matters, that Lee is already becoming stronger right in front of them. That growth does not always crawl. Sometimes it detonates. There is no mockery in him when he says it, no prankster edge, only respect. Naruto, who has awakened overnight into terrifying power, still recognizes the legitimacy of someone who clawed their way forward the hard way. In another story, that would be a moment of solidarity. Here, it becomes something heavier. Because when Naruto says Lee could become one of the greatest taijutsu users the village has ever seen, it sounds less like encouragement and more like a verdict from someone capable of judging it. Then the fight turns ugly. Lee's body begins to give out under the strain. Gaara's bloodlust slips to the surface. The sand surges forward with lethal intent, and in that instant every Jonin in the room knows the same thing. If no one intervenes, Rock Lee's career ends here, maybe his life with it. But before any of them can move, Naruto is already there. He flashes into the arena, meets Gaara's sand head on, and smashes it aside with a hand packed so densely with chakra that the resulting shockwave tears through the space like thunder. It is not simply a rescue. It is a declaration. The impact alone makes clear that Naruto's earlier fight with Kiba was not an upper limit. It was restraint. He plants himself between Lee and Gaara and tells the Sand Ninja that the match is over. And Gaara, for the first time in that exam, looks afraid, not irritated, not bloodthirsty. Afraid. It is not subtle either. Naruto's presence presses against him in a way that triggers something primal. His breathing changes. His chakra grows unstable. The thing inside him recognizes danger before the boy himself can process it. Baki appears almost immediately, cutting in with the speed of a man who knows exactly how bad this could become if the moment continues. Kakashi and Guy arrive too, but the emotional center of the scene has already shifted. The other villages came here expecting to assess promising young shinobi. What they are seeing now is something else entirely. A genin who moves ahead of elite jonin reactions, whose chakra pressure can freeze a room, who terrifies another Jinchuriki on instinct alone, and who still somehow complains about being interrupted like an annoyed teenager rather than a looming catastrophe. That contradiction keeps growing. Back in the stands, Naruto grumbles that he would have handled it just fine, and then, because emotional control still lags behind power, his frustration leaks outward in a flare of chakra. This time, everyone feels it directly, not a distant pulse, not a rumor carried through the forest. This is immediate, intimate, heavy enough that the weaker genin lock up where they stand. Even the jonin tense. The room does not merely react to Naruto anymore. It braces against him, and then Sakura smacks him on the back of the head. It is such a stupidly ordinary act that for a second it breaks the fear. Naruto blinks, confused. His chakra settles at once. The pressure vanishes. But what remains is almost worse, because now everyone in the room has experienced it for themselves. They know the scale of the thing wrapped in this loud blonde idiot, and they know he's not fully in control of how frightening he has become. Naruto notices the fear then, really notices it. Not the old kind, not disgust, not contempt, fear. That realization lands harder than he expects, so he does what only Naruto would do in a moment like this. He shoots straight up to the Hokage's platform and asks, loudly enough for everyone to hear, whether the people here are just that lame. Under any other circumstances, it would sound like childish boasting. Here, it sounds like a boy accidentally discovering that the world is finally looking at him with the seriousness he always wanted, and hating how cold that seriousness feels. Jiraiya answers him honestly. Naruto's chakra pressure is simply too much for most of the people in this room. That is the truth of it. Naruto takes that in, turns his attention to the strange old man beside the Hokage, and studies him with enough intensity to make even Jiraiya uncomfortable. Then, just as abruptly, he loses interest and drops back down again. But the adults do not move on so easily, because by now the exam is no longer just about who will make the finals. It is about what Naruto Uzumaki is becoming, and how much time the village has before everyone else starts asking the same question. That question starts to matter immediately, because once the preliminaries end, Naruto stops being merely a surprise and becomes a problem that powerful people feel required to solve before someone else reaches him first. The remaining matches blur past the way unimportant things often do when a room has already decided where the real danger is. Names are drawn, the finalists are set. Sasuke is placed on a collision path with Gaara, and that alone is enough to tighten the atmosphere around Team 7 again. Naruto notices it at once. He notices the shift in Sasuke's breathing, the tension buried under the Uchiha's usual coldness, the way Kakashi's posture changes by a fraction when Gaara's name is confirmed. To everyone else, it is just another difficult matchup. To Naruto, it looks like a fuse being lit. And that matters because for all his bravado, he can see the difference between difficult and catastrophic now. He watches Gaara more closely after that, looking past the boy's expression and into the strange, layered violence packed inside his chakra. It is not just hostility, it is instability held together by force of habit. Something contained, but not well. Something that reacts to pressure with panic and bloodlust. Naruto does not yet know the full story, but he understands enough to dislike what he sees. Whatever is happening inside Gaara, it is ugly. More than that, it feels familiar in all the wrong ways. A weapon made into a child made into a warning. Then the preliminaries officially close and the room begins to disperse. That should have been the end of the public spectacle. Instead, it becomes the beginning of the political one. Most of the Chunin leave with their teams, already turning their thoughts toward the month of training ahead, toward grudges, strategies, and private hopes of winning the finals. But Kakashi does not lead Team 7 toward the gates. He steers them toward the Hokage. Jiraiya stays nearby. A and Bu shift in the shadows, subtle but unmistakable. Sakura notices first that something is off. Sasuke notices next and says nothing. Naruto, as usual, only pretends not to care. The walk to the Hokage's office feels longer than it is, if only because of how much goes unsaid along the way. Naruto fills some of that silence by looking everywhere except where he is supposed to. Now that his perception has sharpened beyond anything he has known before, ordinary places refuse to stay ordinary. Hallways are stained with old residual chakra from shinobi moving through them for years. Doors carry traces of seals and protective techniques. Even the air in certain corners feels denser, as if it remembers tension long after the people responsible have left. Naruto does not know whether this is normal and he simply never noticed, or whether his eyes are showing him layers of the world that were always meant to remain hidden. By the time they step into the Hokage's office, his attention has already shifted from the people in the room to the room itself. The chakra there is old, not weak. Old, soaked into wood, paper, floorboards, and walls over years of decisions made by people far stronger than most of the village will ever understand. The Hokage's desk practically hums with residue, like history has weight, and that weight never fully leaves. Naruto stares at it hard enough that everyone else has to call his name twice before he finally looks up. Sakura snaps at him first. Naruto admits, without embarrassment, that he was not listening. It is such a classically stupid answer that Sasuke and Sakura both nearly die of secondhand shame on the spot. Kakashi rubs the back of his head. Jiraiya snorts. Even the Hokage, faced with the most dramatic shift in one of his village's future assets in years, has to suppress the urge to sigh like a tired grandfather. Then Hiruzen asks the question directly. What can Naruto tell them about his eyes? That is where the conversation changes from curiosity to genuine concern. Naruto tries to explain, and like so many things now, the explanation reaches truth faster than polish. He says he can see chakra, but immediately rejects that as too simple. Seeing is not enough to describe it. He understands chakra. Its structure, its behavior, the way it belongs inside bodies, inside techniques, inside materials, inside the world itself. It is less like looking and more like recognizing a language he somehow never had to learn. The words come out clumsy, full of comparisons that feel absurd in a room like this. He compares it to ramen at one point because of course he does. But the substance beneath the awkwardness makes every adult there go still. Naruto points to the Hokage's desk and casually explains how it was formed, describing the chakra composition of the wood and the faint natural energy still moving through it. He speaks about the first Hokage's handiwork not like a theory, but like a person describing the grain of the material in front of him. No hesitation, no uncertainty, he just knows. Jiraiya's expression darkens first. Because he has seen something like this before. Not the same eyes, not the same effect, but another pair of legendary eyes that changed the relationship between a person and chakra itself. Nagato flashes through his memory. The impossible perception of the Rinnegan. The way power like that disrupted every normal standard used to judge shinobi ability. The comparison does not fit cleanly, but it lingers long enough for him to test something else. He asks Kakashi for chakra paper. The request catches the room off guard, but only briefly. Kakashi hands it over. Jiraiya passes sheets to Sakura and Sasuke first, letting the ordinary results establish a baseline. Sakura's paper crumbles to dust. Earth. Sasuke's wrinkles rather than burning cleanly, suggesting lightning rather than fire as his strongest nature. Interesting, but not the point. Then, Naruto gets his paper. For a second, it glows blue. That alone is enough to make everyone in the room stare. Chakra paper is not supposed to do that. Jiraiya's eyes narrow. Kakashi exposes his Sharingan. Even the Hokage leans forward. Naruto, delighted by the effect, grins and announces that he broke Jiraiya's little test. Then he admits he is joking and lets the real result happen. The paper slices cleanly in half. Wind. A normal enough affinity on its face, but no one in that room can fully ignore what happened just before it. Naruto manipulated the process, interfered with it deliberately, changed the reaction long enough to make a point. That is not merely an unusual gift, that is absurd control. The kind of control most shinobi spend entire careers failing to achieve. Jiraiya demands to know what he did. Naruto shrugs and answers with exactly the kind of honesty that makes the adults more uneasy, not less. He says he was watching what happened when Sakura and Sasuke used their chakra and thought he should be able to do something similar, just different. He does not boast. He does not sound particularly proud. To him, it seemed obvious that if chakra has structure, it should be possible to interfere with that structure if you understand it deeply enough. That answer hangs in the room like a warning bell. Because a shinobi with immense reserves is dangerous. A shinobi with monstrous control is dangerous. A shinobi who can perceive, understand, and manipulate chakra at this level with almost no formal training is something else entirely. Sakura feels that danger without fully understanding the mechanics of it. Sasuke feels it more sharply and hates every second of it. For him, Naruto's rise is becoming intolerable for reasons he cannot cleanly separate. Part jealousy, part disbelief, part the raw offense of watching the dead last leap over him in a single violent arc. He has trained all his life to be exceptional. Naruto was supposed to be loud, reckless background noise. Not this. Kakashi senses that conflict brewing and quietly shifts his attention towards Sasuke, but even he can only spare so much thought for it. The real conversation now is happening between the adults, and the looks they trade more than the words they say. Danzo will hear about this. The elders will hear about this. Orochimaru, if he has not already grasped the scale of the problem, will learn fast. And outside the village, rumors have a way of moving quicker than messengers when the subject is extraordinary enough. The Hokage makes the decision before the room can spin further into speculation. Naruto is not to be left drifting freely after this. No gradual courtship, no careful wait-and-see approach, no chance for outside hands to reach him first. Jiraiya will stay with him. Immediately, closely. Whatever freedom the Toad Sage expected to enjoy in the coming weeks evaporates on the spot beneath the weight of the order. Jiraiya complains internally because that is his nature, but he accepts the seriousness of it without argument. Naruto, meanwhile, is still only half aware of the strategic panic building around him. He hears enough to understand that the old pervert is going to be around more often. He notices enough to realize adults are talking about him like he is both treasure and disaster. But he does not yet understand the full shape of the cage that begins forming around valuable things the moment enough people decide they matter. And that is the cruel irony at the center of all of this. Naruto spent years aching to be seen. Now the village has finally started looking at him, and what it sees is power great enough to draw every dangerous eye in the shinobi world. That is the first real taste Naruto gets of the cost of becoming extraordinary, because the next phase of the story is not about applause or simple fear. It is about what power draws out of the people standing closest to the throne when the one man holding the village together can no longer do it himself. By the time the dust of the Chunin exam settles, the invasion has already carved its damage into the leaf. Buildings are broken open, streets are under repair. Lists of the dead are still being counted, and the village survives not because it escaped disaster, but because enough of its strongest fighters met that disaster head-on and refused to bend. Naruto can see those scars more clearly than most. Not just the missing walls and shattered rooftops, but the residue of battle left behind in the wood, stone, and air. Violent chakra burns itself into places when enough of it is used, and now the village seemed haunted by the memory of what it barely endured. There should be relief and survival. Instead, there is tension, because Orochimaru is still alive. That fact sits in Naruto's mind like poison. The third Hokage's desperate technique ended the battle, crippled the snake's plans, and protected the village from immediate ruin, but it did not finish the man responsible. Sasuke still bears the curse mark. Anko still bears hers. Those marks are proof enough that Orochimaru remains somewhere beyond the village walls, wounded perhaps, furious certainly, but alive. Worse than that, the third is left comatose in the aftermath, his body ravaged by the cost of the jutsu he used. Naruto understands enough now to know how bad that is. The old man is not just injured. He is broken in a way ordinary medicine cannot solve. The village healers can ease pain, monitor damage, keep him breathing, but none of them can pull him back from where he has fallen. Naruto can feel it in the way the adults speak when they think he is not listening, in the tension around the hospital, in the nervous vacuum opening at the center of every meeting. The strongest pillar in the leaf is down, and the moment that happens, everyone with an agenda starts pretending it is concerned. That is what brings Naruto into the council chamber. He walks into that room already irritated and leaves it with something colder in his chest. The chamber itself is built for authority without warmth, torchlight, stone, no personality, no comfort. Just enough structure to remind everyone inside that decisions made here do not need to be kind to matter. Naruto takes one look around and understands immediately that this is where people come to justify ugly things in a respectable tone. The clan heads are there, advisors, commanders, elders who survived long enough to confuse age with wisdom. Every one of them looking at him differently now, not as the village nuisance, not as the loud son of no one important, as an asset, a threat, a variable. They do not say it that way, of course. They ask questions, measured ones, careful ones, about his awakening, about the extent of his abilities, about what he can see, about what he might become with proper handling. The language stays polished, but Naruto hears the machinery underneath it. Some are curious, some are afraid, some are calculating whether he can be pointed in a useful direction before he becomes too difficult to manage. And then Danzo speaks. Naruto had disliked him before on instinct alone. There are some people whose chakra feels rotten even before words confirm it. Danzo is one of them. His suggestions arrive wrapped in talk of security and training and preparedness, but the meaning is obvious enough. Naruto should be monitored more closely, disciplined more strictly, developed in a way that serves the village's needs first and his own thoughts never. That is when Naruto's patience finally snaps. Not in wild anger, not in a childish outburst. In clarity. He realizes, standing there in front of them, that many of these people do not care what happened to him because they care about him. They care because a new piece has appeared on the board, and every hand in the room wants to be the first to move it. The old man is down, the village is vulnerable, Orochimaru is still out there. And in the middle of all that uncertainty stands Naruto, suddenly powerful enough that the future around him feels unstable. He leaves that chamber with one thought burning cleanly through everything else. They can all go to hell. If the third can only be saved by one person, then he is done waiting for the village to drown itself in meetings while that person remains far away. Tsunade is the answer. Not politically, not symbolically, literally. If anyone alive has the knowledge and raw healing power to drag the Hokage back from the edge, it is her. Naruto knows it. Jiraiya knows it. The council knows it too, but they hesitate for reasons Naruto has no patience for. Pride, old grudges, timing, optics. The kind of excuses that sound important right up until someone dies while people are still arranging the perfect way to ask for help. So Naruto gives Jiraiya until sunset. After that, he is going. Jiraiya, to his credit, recognizes that the threat is not empty. He also recognizes something else. Naruto is no longer a child who can simply be stalled with a vague promise and a pat on the head. Those new eyes cut through hesitation too quickly. He sees enough of the political game to despise it, but not enough yet to play it himself. That makes him dangerous in a very specific way. He will act, which is how the two of them end up leaving the village together. The road out of Konoha gives Naruto a kind of silence he has not had since the awakening. Not peace exactly. His mind still races. His eyes still pull too much information from the world. But motion helps. Distance helps. Every mile between him and the council chamber feels like a layer of grime being scraped off his skin. Jiraiya remains his usual contradictory self through much of the journey, half irritating, half useful, serious only in short flashes that matter more because of how rarely he lets them linger. Naruto spends that travel time doing what he always does when reality shifts beneath him. He learns. He studies chakra flow in moving water, in trees, in travelers they pass, in birds startled from branches. He pushes at his own control constantly, testing where precision ends and strain begins. He starts noticing that his greatest weakness now is not lack of power or lack of perception, but lack of vocabulary. He understands more than he can explain, more than he can even organize. It frustrates him, because instinct without framework can only take him so far. Jiraiya notices that too. Their training on the road is not elegant. It is practical, abrasive, and occasionally ridiculous, which suits both of them. Jiraiya begins forcing Naruto to think about his chakra deliberately rather than simply letting his eyes guide him. Shape, nature, density, output, suppression. The basics, but now the basics matter differently, because Naruto's natural ceiling has risen so absurdly high that even small mistakes have larger consequences. A sloppy burst of chakra from the old Naruto meant wasted energy. A sloppy burst from this Naruto can terrify a room. By the time they reach Tanzuka-gai, the world has widened again. The city feels different from the leaf the moment they step into it, warmer in some ways, looser. Full of vice, noise, laughter, gamblers chasing luck they do not deserve, and people who measure survival in pleasures rather than military structure. Naruto notices how alive it all feels. Not safer, not cleaner, just freer. Jiraiya, meanwhile, looks almost nostalgic, which immediately makes Naruto suspicious. They wait until nightfall to move properly. Jiraiya claims Tsunade will be drunk enough then not to notice them entering the village. Naruto suspects the real issue is that even now, with all his strength, he still cannot fully hide his own presence. His chakra is too large, too distinct. Suppression remains difficult, and that irritates him more than he likes to admit. For someone raised to become a ninja, failing at subtlety feels like a private insult. Then Jiraiya leads him into a quieter bar at the edge of the lane, and there she is. Tsunade, not as a legend in a book, not as a name spoken with reverence by old men. As a woman sitting in a dim booth, already radiating force before she says a word. Shizune is beside her. Jiraiya moves first, smiling with that false ease people use when they are walking toward history and trying not to show it. Naruto follows with his hands in his pockets and says almost nothing. That is deliberate. For once, he chooses to observe first. Because the moment Tsunade looks at Jiraiya and then at him, Naruto understands that this meeting is carrying more than one battle into the room. The Hokage's life, old team bonds, old betrayals, old grief. None of it settled, none of it simple. And before the night is over, Naruto is going to learn that raw power can force many things in this world, but it cannot force someone to come home. Tsunade does not answer Jiraiya with sympathy. She answers him with anger. Not theatrical anger, not the kind that burns hot and fades quickly, but the kind built over years until it hardens into refusal. The moment the truth is placed on the table that the third Hokage is dying, that the leaf needs her, that the old world is shifting again and asking her to step back into it, the air between her and Jiraiya changes. Old wounds that never really healed open at once. Old promises, old grief, old blood still staining memories that neither of them can set down cleanly. Naruto watches all of it without interrupting. That alone tells Jiraiya more than enough about how much he has changed. Because the old Naruto would have jumped in almost immediately. He would have shouted, argued, demanded. This Naruto still feels those impulses. But now he can see too much. He can see the tension in Tsunade's body whenever the village is mentioned. He can see how tightly Shizune is holding herself together. He can see the way Jiraiya's usual foolishness is only a mask stretched over genuine hope. And beneath all of that, he can see something else in Tsunade that makes him pause. Pain does not always make people weaker. Sometimes it makes them impossible to move. So the first clash is not physical, it is ideological. Jiraiya asking her to return, Tsunade refusing. Naruto finally speaking when he can no longer stand the distance. She tries to keep between herself and the consequences of saying no. His words come sharp and unpolished, exactly the way truth often does when dragged out of him. He does not dress the issue up. The old man is down. The village needs her. If she is really as strong and as capable as everyone claims, then hiding from that because life hurt her is cowardly. That goes about as well as anyone should expect. Tsunade's temper flares. Shizune recoils. Jiraiya looks like he wants to laugh and panic at the same time. But Naruto, in typical Naruto fashion, has no instinct for backing down once he decides something matters. He pushes because he means it. Because he cannot understand how someone with the power to help could choose not to. Because in his world, abandoning the people who still need you feels unforgivable. And because some part of him knows this argument is not only about the Hokage, it is about every adult who ever looked away when he needed them to step in. That first meeting ends badly, which in its own way means it succeeds. Tsunade is no longer indifferent. She is angry now, provoked into engagement, and for people like her that is closer to movement than silence ever was. The challenge Naruto throws at her lingers too, not formal, not elegant, just raw defiance. If she really doubts him that much, if she thinks he is only another loud kid making promises too big for his body, then she can test him. He is more than willing. What follows is not peace. It is escalation. The road beyond Tansukagai turns violent fast because Orochimaru and Kabuto are never far behind a decision like this. They come not only for Tsunade, but for leverage, for opportunity, for the chance to turn old grief into present advantage. Orochimaru offers her the one temptation cruel enough to matter, the possibility of the dead, of undoing loss, of touching the impossible. It is the kind of offer built specifically to poison a wounded heart. Naruto does not understand all of it at first, but he understands enough to hate the way the snake speaks to her, like pain is a weakness to be harvested. Then the battlefield opens, and once it does, the entire shape of the arc changes from persuasion to proof. The clash at Tanzuka Hills becomes the first true demonstration of what Naruto's awakening means outside the safety of exams and village walls. Against real monsters, against veterans, against names whispered across countries with fear attached to them. This is where Naruto stops being a terrifying rumor inside Konoha and starts becoming a problem for the wider shinobi world. Kabuto moves first, efficient and deadly as ever, a man built around cutting through hesitation. Jiraiya engages. Tsunade is dragged into the center whether she wants to be or not. Shizune supports where she can. Orochimaru watches for openings like a snake coiling around time itself. Then another layer of danger crashes into the field. Akatsuki. Not in theory, not as distant shadows, present, watching, testing. Itachi Uchiha. Kisame Hoshigaki. Suddenly the battlefield stops being merely bad and becomes historic. Too many monsters in one place, too many agendas colliding at once. Even Jiraiya, who can normally joke his way through the first seconds of catastrophe, has to treat the situation with full gravity. Orochimaru wants Tsunade, Akatsuki wants Naruto. The old bonds between Sannin crack open in real time. And every one of those forces underestimates, at least initially, what Naruto has become. That mistake does not survive contact. Naruto's role in the battle is not to dominate the field effortlessly from the beginning. That would be too easy, too false, and it would miss the point of his growth. Instead, he is forced to learn under pressure, to apply the Six Eyes not as abstract brilliance, but as survival in motion. Infinity does not arrive as a polished legend. It arrives as a desperate, brilliant answer to an impossible problem. He reaches for the structure of space the same way he has been reaching for the structure of chakra and, for the first time, something answers. Attacks stop. Not because they miss, because they cannot reach him. That moment changes everything. For the people fighting beside him, it is awe mixed with confusion. For the enemies facing him, it is the first sharp warning that the absurd perception granted by those eyes is beginning to evolve into something even worse. Naruto is no longer only reading jutsu. He is changing the relationship between himself and the world around him. Distance becomes weaponized. Contact becomes conditional. What should be lethal starts failing in front of him for reasons his enemies cannot solve quickly enough. Then come the next applications. Red, blue, force directed to space itself. Compression, repulsion, attraction, raw concepts made violent, none of it fully mastered, all of it dangerous, and every bit of it announcing that Naruto's ceiling has moved again. Kisame, for all his monstrous strength, leaves that battlefield altered by the realization that the blonde kid in front of him is not some future threat to file away for later. He is a present complication. Itachi sees even more. He sees the discipline buried underneath Naruto's recklessness. The way his eyes accelerate understanding faster than ordinary experience should allow. The fact that if this continues, the boy could grow into something no existing political balance can comfortably contain. By the time the battle closes, the field is littered with consequences. Tsunade cannot stay detached after fighting through that chaos. She has seen Naruto with her own eyes now, not just his power, but the shape of his conviction. Jiraiya's faith in him stops sounding sentimental and starts sounding strategic. The old world shifts 1 degree closer to accepting that the village's future is no longer waiting politely in the next generation. It is already here, loud and impatient in glowing blue. Tsunade returns, not because she is healed, not because the past is resolved, because despite everything, some part of her still cannot fully turn away from responsibility once it stands bleeding in front of her. She steps into the office of Hokage, not as a triumphant savior, but as a woman dragged back into war by the realization that refusing the burden does not make it disappear. And Naruto, almost immediately, starts driving her insane. That becomes one of the story's strange pleasures, because for all his terrifying evolution, Naruto remains Naruto. He still talks too much, still interrupts, still says the wrong thing at the right time and the right thing with the worst possible delivery. Tsunade, now carrying the hat of the fifth, has inherited not only a broken village and a mountain of politics, but also a walking catastrophe with divine eyes and no instinct for decorum. Their dynamic becomes friction and reluctant trust in equal measure. She sees the danger in him more clearly than most, which is precisely why she refuses to let the village reduce him to a weapon without a voice. But the wider world is already moving. Negotiations with the sand force the leaf into uneasy diplomacy. The invasion cannot simply be forgotten. Blood was spilled, alliances bent, trust fractured. Tsunade travels with Kakashi and Naruto as escorts to handle the political fallout, and that mission becomes yet another proving ground. Assassins, rogue elements, opportunists from beyond the main villages, all of them start circling once the rumors about Naruto's awakening spread. The shinobi world is larger than the main caste people like to name. And one of the most important things this timeline begins to show is that the world notices power like his long before the official histories bother to record it. Naruto survives those encounters not because he is untouchable, but because he is learning faster than the people trying to kill him can adapt. That distinction matters. He is not yet the final form of this power. He is the early storm. Back in the Leaf, Team 7 starts changing around that fact. Sasuke's rivalry with Naruto deepens into something sharper and more dangerous. It is no longer simple irritation or bruised pride. Naruto's rise has created a problem. Sasuke cannot punch his way out of emotionally. Because what do you do when the person you dismissed as beneath you suddenly starts climbing beyond your sightline? Sasuke trains harder, watches more, burns quieter. Sakura, meanwhile, grows too, forced by events and the widening gap around her to stop seeing herself as a spectator in the lives of stronger people. Even Kakashi, who has long lived in the posture of a detached instructor, starts treating his team like pieces on a board moving toward a war larger than any of them should have to carry yet. Then the mission into the Land of Sound comes. And that is where the current edge of this story begins to sharpen into something genuinely unstable. The Leaf does not simply send Naruto there for revenge or spectacle. There are strategic reasons. Orochimaru must be addressed. The third still hangs in the balance. Information matters. The Sound 4 matter. Sasuke's future matters. Every road leading toward that country feels like it was laid down by old sins waiting for someone young enough or reckless enough to step on them anyway. The deeper Team 7 moves into Orochimaru's territory, the more obvious it becomes that this is not just an enemy nation. It is a laboratory of obsession. Naruto feels it before the others can name it. The air itself seems wrong to him. The chakra of the place is stale, altered, bent around experiments and pain and long-term cruelty. Orochimaru is not simply hiding there. He has shaped the land around his presence in the same way rot reshapes a body from the inside. And when the confrontation comes, it comes hard. The Sound 4 are not minor nuisances here. They are pressure points. Sasuke is tested. Sakura is tested. Kakashi is forced into the open against Orochimaru himself. The question beneath the whole encounter is simple and vicious. What kind of future does Sasuke actually want? Orochimaru knows how to ask that question in the ugliest possible way, dangling power and revenge like sharpened bait. Naruto, of course, responds to that with immediate hostility. For him, the answer is simple. Anyone offering you chains and calling them wings deserves to get hit through a wall. But the conflict is not clean. Orochimaru is too cunning for that, too willing to let psychological wounds do half the work before fists ever matter. Naruto can overpower pieces of the battlefield, yes, he can erupt into terrifying force. The aura around him can make entire rooms feel smaller. The Six Eyes let him parse jutsu, trap structures, and combat rhythms at a level that changes how battles unfold. Yet even now there are limits. Even now there are things inside him he does not understand. Which is why the latest turn in the story matters most. Because the conflict with Orochimaru and the pressure around the Nine Tails finally push Naruto inward, into the mindscape. Into that dark architecture he has carried all his life without ever truly controlling. He walks through a corridor of dread toward the gate that has defined him since infancy, and for the first time he is not just the prisoner of that place. He is entering it with awareness, with questions. with enough strength now that the beast behind those bars cannot simply be treated as a faceless source of rage anymore. The Nine Tails is not gone. It was never gone. It was cut off, separated, revealed in absence by what Naruto became without its constant interference. And now, with the wider world destabilizing around him, the truth of that relationship has become too important to ignore. That is where the story currently stands in the source material. Not at peace, not resolved, not anywhere close to a final ending. Naruto has already changed the balance of the Chunin exams, forced Tsunade back into the village, shaken Akatsuki's calculations, altered the political posture of the Leaf, and turned himself into a threat every serious player on the board now has to account for. But he is still growing, still learning, still crashing into the limits of a power that feels almost too large for the world around him. Orochimaru remains in play. Sasuke's path is not settled. The Nine Tails still waits behind the gate. And the shinobi world is only beginning to understand what it means that Naruto Uzumaki can now see it so clearly. That is what makes this timeline so dangerous. One interruption in the Forest of Death did not just make Naruto stronger, it changed the logic of the future. Every alliance, every rivalry, every battlefield, every decision now bends around the fact that the boy once dismissed as a loud failure has become the most unpredictable force of his generation. And the terrifying part is that this still feels like the beginning. If you want the next chapter of this timeline, make sure you're subscribed to Fanfics in a Nutshell, because from this point forward, the stakes only get higher, the enemies only get smarter, and every new step Naruto takes threatens to reshape the world all over again. For now, the story stands at the edge of something much larger, and what comes next will decide everything.